Howdy friend, this spring I was asked to be the 2024 Artist in Residence at IBMA World of Bluegrass, the biggest honor of my career to date. As part of that role, it was my responsibility to coordinate Picking for the Prize guitar contest and Martin guitar giveaway hosted at IBMA World of Bluegrass. I was really excited about this opportunity for a number of reasons, one being the fact that I got to work with the title sponsor of the event, Martin Guitar. Thanks to Anna Kline at IBMA and Lynn, Tinsey, Martin graciously allowed me, my pal Mark Cosgrove, and my wife Quinn to come to Nazareth to film some behind-the-scenes footage of the factory tour, not normally allowed. My tour guide for the day was Jason Ahner, the Martin Guitar Archives and Museum Manager, the leading expert on everything Martin Guitar. I was extremely excited to get a peek at the Martin build process, especially with Jason's narration, but I had no idea what Jason had in store for us at the end of the tour. Once we arrived at Martin Guitars, Jason met us in the lobby, and straight through these doors, the tour kicks off at the prestigious Martin Custom Shop. You can see that these guitars are handmade in the care of the finest luthiers at the factory, and it was really impressive to see the masters at work up close. Aside from custom orders and the authentic series of Martins, this part of the factory is reserved for Martin's most unique projects, like the limited edition of Martin's clock-themed D200 Deluxe, patterned after their 2 millionth guitar, or this Bitcoin-inspired D42, or this Year of the Snake guitar. After checking out the inlay station and all of the impressive CNC robots they have generating the beautiful inlay, Jason gave us a preview of how the tops are voiced by their luthiers in the custom shop. After we move out of the custom shop, we got to see this really cool hallway that details the Martin build process kind of from A to Z. Outside of that hallway, we got to see one of the coolest things, in my opinion, at the Martin factory. This industrial laser cutter that's responsible for cutting out all of the tops at Martin Guitar. From there, we got to see the side bending station where they make all of the rims for the guitars. We got to see the kerfing installed on those sides after they were bent. We also got a detailed explanation of how Martin uses laser cutters to cut out their logo and serial numbers on the heel blocks and then put their logo on virtually every other part of a Martin guitar. One of my favorite spots was the binding channel cutting station. As you can see, we've got some folks over here that are doing it by hand on machines, but the coolest thing in my opinion was the CNC machine that they used to cut out the binding channel on these guitars. It was a little nerve-wracking watching this robot throw these guitar bodies around inside of the CNC, but Martin clearly has their stuff dialed in, and this was one of the most impressive things that I saw on the tour. After moving through the binding station and checking out some of the fancy inlay that the Martin team was putting in these guitars, we got to say hey to Tony Rice really quick, and then we moved on to the finishing station. This was one of the more unique parts of the Martin factory and actually had a couple different sections dedicated to finishing the guitars. There was the finish sanding station that we have here, the station where they apply grain filler to get a really smooth, even surface for the nitrocellulose lacquer to be sprayed onto, and then the polishing station where we get the second most impressive thing that I saw on the Martin factory tour, the buffing robots. In some ways this was a little scarier to me than the binding channel robot, because Jason told us that at certain points in the testing process, the wheels had thrown guitar bodies off of the robot arm, completely destroying them against the side of the machine. Obviously they have it dialed in now, but regardless, this is a huge feat of technology and I thought it was awesome. After the guitars are buffed, Martin has this custom curing room where they keep the room at a bit of a higher temperature so the finish actually cures a little faster than it would naturally in the open. After the finishing station, we got to see how some necks were made. This was really neat because Martin still hand shapes all of their necks. On the way through the neck station, I got to see probably the only example of intact abalone that I had ever checked out. Naturally, after the neck shaping station, there was the station where they take the necks and fit them to the bodies of the guitar. Now Martin is actually using two different types of neck joint these days. One that just kind of directly allows the neck to fit into the guitar, and then the more traditional dovetail joint neck. Jason was kind of explaining to us that the dovetail requires a little bit more work because it's a compound kind of V pattern. After the necks get fitted to the bodies, Martin has a platoon of Plek machines ready to set these guitars up. In case you don't know what a Plek machine is, it's actually a CNC robot that's been custom programmed to perfectly set up guitars. The Plek machine is really interesting because it compensates for the string pressure that is absent from the guitar when you take the strings off. Some of you might know that when you take the strings off of the guitar, the neck of the guitar tends to bow backward a little bit. You lose some of that neck relief. So this means that you actually can't set the guitar up properly without compensating for that string tension. Well, the Plek machine actually has algorithms to compensate for this, so naturally Martin uses a whole platoon of these things to set up their guitars at the factory. It's extremely rare to find one Plek machine out there, let alone 6 of them sitting in one place. The last thing we got to see on the Martin tour was this huge complex with heavy machinery that was solely dedicated to cutting fingerboards and heel blocks. Alright, at this point I was already geeking out quite a bit over the heavy machinery and the build process for Martin guitars. But the geeking out is not over yet, my friend. As soon as I walked out of the factory tour, I saw a little glass case over to my left, and Jason immediately went over there and started unlocking it, and I was like, oh cool, we get to see another Martin guitar. Well, he pulls out a 1947 D18 that was owned by the Hank Williams. This was the first guitar that I actually got to play at the Martin factory that day, and couldn't have been more blown away. I got goosebumps even thinking about the fact that Hank Williams held this guitar at one point in time. And naturally, I had to render a little bit of Hank on the guitar. Now at this point, Jason was like, nah, it's getting on lunchtime, let's maybe go grab something to eat, and then we'll come back and take you through the museum. After a delicious sushi lunch, we came back to the Martin Museum. I thought we were just in for a regular museum tour. We walk inside and I immediately see some of the oldest Martins that I've ever seen in my entire life. As I started to look through the glass cabinets at some of these guitars and listen to Jason, I heard a jangling and noticed that he was unlocking the glass cabinets for these guitars, at which point I was like, oh dang, do I get to hold this thing? Do I get to play this thing?
What's the oldest tune you know?
Yeah, what is the oldest tune that I know?
That's a good extra.
Man, what a tone. The first thing that Jason hands us is a Stauffer-style guitar made by Martin in 1834. Yeah, that's right, 1834. That's 1 year after the Martin Guitar Factory had started. And Jason even said that this is the oldest Martin guitar that the museum has in its possession right now. The next guitar that Jason handed to us was an 1843 Martin.
But what's unique about it is this is the earliest known guitar to have an X-brace top.
The first example of an X-brace guitar, extremely historically important, especially for us grassers that can't handle anything but X-brace guitars. As if that wasn't impressive enough already, we round the corner in the museum, and Jason hands us this guitar. He says immediately that it's unplayable, but it's historically significant for the fact that it was Les Paul's
First guitar.
He handed us the guitar and we could see numbers that Les had etched into the fingerboard on the treble side of the fingerboard. Apparently, Les used to go to a local club where he would watch the guitar player and then mark which fret numbers his fingers were going over at any point in time, then go home and try and recreate that on his guitar with the numbers on the fingerboard. This guitar was in pretty rough shape and not very playable, but the fact that we got to hold something that was owned by the great Les Paul, can't beat that. Next, we got to see some cool Martin mandolins. They definitely got in on the craze in the early half of the last century. And as you can see, there's some pretty unique examples here, like this Martin harp mandolin. Never seen anything like that before, right? At this point, I definitely had to see, can Martin mandolins bluegrass? Yes, they can. Next up on the star-studded list of guitars played and touched by famous people, we have a guitar that was actually signed by Babe Ruth.
You know you can find baseballs and baseball bats signed by both of them. I'm pretty sure this is the only guitar.
Well, that alone must be
Priceless, yeah.
priceless.
1926 W18.
Alright, let's stop. Little did we know, everything that we've seen up to this point in time was just the appetizer, my friend, because as soon as we round the next corner, Jason showed us exactly what any bluegrass flat picker would be looking for. A cabinet of pre-war 1930s and 1940s OMs, triple O's, and dreadnoughts. The first guitar that Jason decides to pull out is one of 11 OM45 Deluxes made in 1930, and it did not disappoint from a tonal perspective.
Listen to the tone of that.
Next up was an example of the first dreadnought ever made, a Ditson 111. A lot of you may know that Martin coined the term dreadnought after the battleship, but Ditson was actually the first company to put this guitar into production. And when I say Ditson, I mean Martin. They were just making guitars for Ditson under their name. Check this thing out though. First dreadnought ever. What the heck? Now, the next guitar that Jason pulled out of the case is the creme de la creme of the Martin lineup, and probably one of the most expensive Martin guitars you would ever hope to buy. A 1942 Martin D45. Check out my reaction as soon as Mark hit a G chord on it.
Man, did you hear when he hit that G chord?
So naturally, we had one of the first dreadnoughts ever made and a 1936 D45 at our disposal. It was time for some jamming. In my opinion, the tour could have ended right there and I would have been floating on cloud 9, but we still had more cool stuff in store. We got to see Joan Baez's guitar with the set list still on the guitar. We got to play a D18 owned by Kurt Cobain. And we got to see some of the kookiest guitars you've ever seen in your entire life. One of Martin's first electric style guitars, and a hollow body electric guitar that was meant to compete with guitars like the Gibson ES335. Check this one out. Now, Jason still had one ace up his sleeve as we were leaving the Martin Museum tour here. Martin's 2.5 millionth guitar, the D 2.5 million. This guitar is extremely unique because it features 436 diamonds, 6 natural sapphires, and 1 ruby inlaid in the guitar for a total weight of 21 carats. Needless to say, this is probably the most expensive adorned guitar ever built out there. Prove me wrong, I would love to see one that has more diamonds on it. Now, not only is this guitar unique because it has 436 diamonds inlaid into it.
So what the story is, when C.F. Martin Sr. and his family arrived on November 16, 1833 in the harbor of New York City, and if they looked up at the night sky, this would have been the constellations they would have seen.
The pickguard even has a map of New York City with the original Martin guitar factory located there. In case you didn't know, Martin actually built in New York before he moved to Nazareth. What a way to end the tour. So, what do you think, my friend? Those have to be some of the craziest, rarest Martin guitars out there. Have you ever played anything like that? If so, drop me a comment below. I've also got links down there in the description to some of the more interesting museum pieces that we saw here today, in case you want to find out more. Lastly, I just want to say a huge thanks to IBMA and Martin Guitar. It has been a complete honor to be the 2024 IBMA World of Bluegrass Artist in Residence, and thanks so much to Martin Guitar for sponsoring Picking for the Prize Guitar Contest and Martin Guitar Giveaway hosted at IBMA. As you folks can see, they have definitely earned their legendary status as the name in acoustic guitars. So, definitely go check out some of those cool Martin pieces. Definitely take a factory tour and a museum tour if you ever get the chance. And we'll catch you down the line.